In the Frame with Deej. Welcome to the next episode of In the Frame. In the Frame.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my.
You're thinking too much, buddy. It's just a coffee bean.
Oh, frick.
And we're back to another episode of In the Frame. Beside me, we have Winnipeg's longest running music talk podcast host. And he's been the host for WitchPoliceRadio for the past 13 years until forever. Beside me, we have Mr. Sam Thompson.
I like that. It's kind of cool. Do I have to hold this forever?
No.
Okay. Right. No, thanks for having me. This is cool. I'm always happy to see new local podcasts.
No, thanks for coming on. Yeah. So, tell me about Sam Thompson.
Apparently, I'm a guy who does a podcast and can't stop. But there's no way to stop doing a podcast. I've been doing this show for a long time. I used to play in bands a number of years ago, and this has kind of kept me in the music scene. When I had kids, I didn't have as much time to play in bands and stuff like that, and this kind of just gave me the opportunity to stay involved, and it's now I can't stop.
Nice. Wow. What made you want to start doing these podcasts?
I didn't really know what a podcast was for a long time, like around the time I started the show, because they weren't new, but they were not as big as they are today, right? And so I was first introduced to the concept of a podcast. I thought it was something you needed an iPod for. And I'm old and set in my ways even back then, and I only listened to physical media. So I listened to records and tapes and CDs, and I didn't have an iPod. So I thought, this is not for me. Whatever a podcast is, I can't do this. And then a friend sent me an interview with an artist that I liked on a podcast, and I realized, wait, this is just talk radio. It's just talk
like
radio.
Howard Stern.
Totally, yeah. It's talk radio about whatever subject you want to talk about. And so at the time, I had one kid. I had another kid on the way. And my background, my day job is in journalism, but for about 10 years, I went to another career for about 10 years. I'm back now, but during that time, I wasn't working as a reporter, and I wasn't in a band.
Yeah.
And so doing the podcast kind of filled both of those holes. I was still involved in the music scene, and I was still doing journalism, and both of those things were important to me, but because of life circumstances and the amount of time I had and stuff, I couldn't be as involved as I used to be. So the podcast kind of filled those spots, and it kept me involved.
Nice. Why don't we start way back and tell me about journalism? When did you first start doing journalism, or did you go to school for it?
Yeah, I did. I mean, well before I went to school for it or did it as a job or anything, I used to always make like little zines as a kid on a typewriter and cutting things out and sticking them together, photocopying them.
What's a zine?
A zine is this is a DIY radio. A zine is a DIY magazine.
Oh.
So there was it still exists. There's still quite a big zine culture.
Okay.
People are publishing their own stuff. And so back then this would have been like early to mid 90s. I was a kid, I was a teenager, whatever. I would make, sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends, these zines, and we'd be talking about music, talking about sports, talking about whatever we were into at the time.
Yeah.
And so that kind of got me interested in. I always wanted to write, and it's something I was always good at. When a lot of things I wasn't good at, writing was always a good one. So,
did your high school ever have like a school paper?
No, but they had a radio station, and I hung out there more than I probably should have. Like I skipped a lot of classes to hang out at the radio station, and so that was another thing too. It was like, oh shit, this is amazing. Like I want to do something like this, right? And so I went to creative communications at Red River College, which is like the main journalism school in this part of the country. Okay. And after that, before I even graduated there, I got a job at the paper in Virden, Manitoba. So I moved out there near the Saskatchewan border. I was 19, I think, at the time, and I worked for that paper. And then a year and a half after that, I came back to the city, worked for some, again, print journalism here. Yeah. And then, and then I had a period, that industry kind of went down the toilet for a lot of reasons. It's still tough. It's still a tough industry to work in. And I mean, I love it, but I had to go on to something else. So I went to, I wasn't doing journalism for quite a while. And that's sort of around the time the podcast came out too. It was, this is an opportunity to get back into something that I love and that I'm good at. And
wow. No, that's very interesting.
And then now I work. Now I'm full-time journalist again for the past 6 or 7 years. So I'm back in it fully.
So your high school had a radio show.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Did you go to like U of W Collegiate?
No, I went to Kelvin.
They have a radio?
They did. I don't know if they do now. I mean,
Yeah.
this was 1997 or something. So I mean,
Wow, 1997.
Bruh.
that's a good use of that. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but that I've never heard of that. I mean, my school never had anything like that. I think we had like a Super Smash Bros. Club.
Okay.
That was a part
It's
of.
very different. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would love to have like a radio show.
It was just within, like, you could only hear it in the school, right? Like, didn't
Yeah.
have any kind of distance, whatever.
Yeah.
But basically, you would provide the music for the cafeteria.
Okay.
So it
No,
was
see, that's amazing.
great. It was actually a class. Like, you got a credit for it too.
Wow.
And then you could also do a show and volunteer and do that. So I did
Okay.
that too. But yeah, it was fun.
So would you say that, or your early zines?
Yeah.
What inspired you to create those zines? Like, did you love journalism? Did you love reading papers, or?
Yeah. I still read a lot. I read a ton as a kid. Like, I think I was a fairly early reader, and I just like obsessed with the library and just constantly reading. And the newspaper was a big part of that. First for the comics when I was younger,
Yeah.
and then it became for the sports stuff. And so I used to obsess over hockey stats, which I still do to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
as a little kid. And so when I was in grade 2 or 3, I think it was grade 2, I made a book about a week in. It was called A Week in Hockey, and it was I like compiled these stats and all this information about like
Wow.
the hockey games that had happened during that week. And so I ended up on the news for that. Actually, I still have the
Really?
video. I have like this little mullet, and because it's like, grade 2 must have been late 80s sometime, right? So yeah, I got on TV
Yeah.
talking about this book. I still have a copy of it too. It's weird because I was a little kid, but it's photocopied pictures of the paper, and I keep track of all these scores and stuff. So
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I was always into it. Like, that was just something that.
There's a saying that people say that legends were legends before they were a legend.
Well, I'm definitely not a legend, but I think that I think it applies for a lot of people.
Yeah, but like, no, for you being on that news, on the news,
Yeah.
for making your book, and then now you kind of have your own whole thing that a lot of people talk about and know,
which is great. Yeah.
and you have a 4.8 rating on Spotify.
Do
Like
I?
that-
You know what's
yeah.
funny? I don't use Spotify. I don't use streaming services. I like I said, I'm old and set in my ways, and I listen to tapes, I listen to records, I listen to CDs, and that's pretty much it. I'll go on Bandcamp to hear new bands
Yeah.
and maybe YouTube, but I don't use streaming. So I have no idea what Spotify even looks like. I mean, my kids have used it, so I've seen it, but
Yeah.
it's so alien to me because, and I know it's the way that people consume music now. And I'm not trying to crap on it or anything, but like, it's just
No, but that's a great rating.
good.
yeah.
That's good. It's good to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah, I had no idea.
Witch Police Radio. How did you come up with that name?
It's not a very interesting story, honestly. People ask me this all the time, and I'll try to give a quick version of it. Is at the time I learned what a podcast was. I was in a band called Dynamo. It was me and my friend Rob Crooks. I don't know if you know who Rob is, but he's a local rapper, producer, singer, songwriter. He's been around. He's not in Manitoba anymore, but he was very involved in the local hip hop scene,
Yeah.
early 2000s, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We had a group called Dynamo. We played this weird kind of experimental electronic stuff, and we had a song called "We Are the Witch Police," and we had it was like two songs. One was called Spaceship, one was called "We Are the Witch Police." And I had recently learned that you could post music, you could upload music to archive.org and then link to it on a blog site. This is all like, it's 2011, 2009, I think, maybe even earlier.
2009,
So I made this free blog site, and I figured out how to get the audio up there because we didn't play a lot of shows. So I thought, here's how we can get music out to people. And I needed to call the website something. It has to be something.blogspot.com. And since the song was called "We Are the Witch Police," I just put witchpolice.blogspot.com. And then years later, like 4 years later, when we started the podcast, Rob was also one of the original co-hosts with me, and my friend John as well when we started out. And we needed to call it something, and we knew we were going to post the audio on that blog, which was called Witch Police, so we just called it Witch Police Radio. And like, Witch Police itself doesn't really have that much of a meaning. I mean, there's a pointless story behind it about something one of my friends said once when we were watching a movie that I wrote down because I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And that turned into the song. It doesn't matter. But so now I'm saddled with this name that doesn't make a lot of sense and definitely isn't evocative of what the show's about. But it works now, I guess.
Witch Police. Is that domain still up? Would you know witchpolice.blogspot.com?
No, I still have access to it, but it's not public. What it became before the podcast was it became like an archive of my old bands, my friends' old bands. A lot of people I know, most of my friends are or were local musicians.
Yeah.
And we all have boxes of tapes in our basements and stuff of, music that never went anywhere or sold 4 copies in 2001 or whatever. So I would digitize all that and upload it on the site. So the blog started off as basically a repository of local music to download for free.
Okay.
And then the podcast sort of took over, and then I eventually moved everything over to a different hosting service, and now it's just witchpolice.com.
Wow. See, what's crazy is how you can compare that to my generation is like, because I also started off making music. I mean, I still do make music, and I play guitar for a studio guitarist for a couple artists here. But a lot of my unreleased songs or songs that I haven't released and songs that I did with friends, we all just keep it on our phones.
For sure, right?
Right, and sometimes most of them were even made on our phones.
Yeah.
So I could just imagine like just shelves of or boxes of tapes full of demos that you have. And
there's a lot. And I also, I don't like using the word hoard because I'm not a hoarder, but I have a very, very large collection of local music.
Yeah.
Physical. I mean, I have, thousands of albums, of records, tapes, CDs, lots of tapes that never got released or they made very small runs and stuff like that. And so I keep adding to that every time I find local stuff. A lot of it comes from the bands I interview. A lot of it I just seek out on my own. And so I've always had like sort of an archive of it. So putting it online kind of made sense. And yeah.
So what's with the obsession with local artists? Like, would you ever do your show with even bigger artists? Or
I have. The format of the show just since the beginning has been local artists or someone who has a connection to Manitoba.
Yeah.
Or someone I just like their music and have in whatever way got in touch with them and it's happened, right?
Yeah.
But usually it's local. I think it's because I played in local bands for years.
Yeah.
I was involved in the local music scene. Most of my friends who were the initial guests on the show, also local music scene.
Oh,
and
okay.
I've been going to shows even before I was in bands since I think I was like first show I went to was in 95 or something, all ages shows, right?
Oh, wow.
And it's always been a huge part of my interest is the local music scene. So it just made sense to keep it local because there's so many artists in Manitoba. It's insane.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been doing this podcast for 13 years. Within the past decade, how would you say the music scene in Winnipeg has evolved throughout the years?
Well, I think a big thing is that the venues that people play at, it's changed drastically. I mean, there's been venues that have opened and closed in the time of doing the show, and they don't exist anymore. And so a lot of the times, I'll even mention festivals or venues or things like that to bands, forgetting how young they are, and they'll have no idea what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it always does that, but it just seems like it's hard to say because I don't get out to shows as much as I used to for I had family and stuff. But it seems like there's always consistently been this very, very strong quantity of bands. Like there's always been so many bands coming out of Winnipeg, regardless of genre, and they've always, in my experience anyway, all been very incestuous. Like everyone's in each other's bands. Everyone's played on this guy's record and that. And so everyone I have on the show,
you have a good point there.
I kind of know of them, even if I haven't met them yet, because it's like I have 3 records you played on from like 10 years ago when they were in this band, and then I had that guy on my show, so I know about this, and it's very connected. So I think that even when venues come and go and styles change, I think that Winnipeg is always going to have a very tight-knit scene because everyone sort of knows each other. I mean, to a certain extent.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, but
I don't know if that answered the question or not.
With venues changing though, because me being in a couple bands myself, I've performed at the Pyramid, the Royal Albert Arms, the Cube. That's I can't think of any other, but would you say that is like the most?
Well, the Pyramid and the Albert. I mean, the Albert is very different now. I used to sneak into the Albert when I was a teenager. First shows I started going to, everyone did that. I talk to anyone from that kind of generation. Yeah. We've going to punk shows. We've all done it, and we used to go to the Albert and sneak in the back and go to punk shows. And it was like, I don't know how much you know about the history of it, but it was very different than it is now. It was a lot like the bathrooms there'd be like blood on the walls and stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Windows broken, mirrors broken. There was a giant hole in the back of the stage where like stuff was seeping out of it, and it was like an absolute shithole. I don't know if I can swear on this, but it was a shithole. And but it was like the best shithole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was it was very sketchy. There was people living upstairs who were like definitely sketchy, and it was and so I was there actually the other week, and it's great how I appreciate that they fixed it up, and it's still a venue, and they've preserved a lot of the old stickers on those poles, which was always really cool. But it's not the Albert like it used to be, right? But it doesn't matter because I'm not the generation who's necessarily going to appreciate it. Like I'm glad it's there for you guys and for the next generation and stuff. So I think that like they've changed, but it's still the old standbys are still there. The West End Cultural Center is always going to have great shows.
Yes.
And when I used to play shows there as a teenager in a ska band, like they didn't have the upstairs. Like, the venue was very different, sort of the way the whole thing was constructed. But it's great still, and it's great that it's still there. So I think a lot of it's like.
Did they have the mezzanine when Dragon Force was in town?
I don't know.
I don't think they did.
I don't know. It's been a few years since they built it, but I think it's actually been like a decade maybe since they built it. But I mean, it's great venue for sure. But a lot of smaller venues came and went, especially like downtown. There'd be a lot of weird little lofts and warehouses and things that would have random shows, and it would be like $5 and there's like 12 punk bands playing or something, or and that kind of thing. The good thing about that is that'll always exist. There's always going to be like, it could be in a different neighborhood I've never been to because the city's expanding, and there's going to be all these guys doing a rap show or whatever, right? And it's I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but Winnipeg I think will never run out of opportunities to play.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Especially during Nuit Blanche, I feel like a lot of those businesses do open up for bands to play or musicians.
It's just different places. That's all. And different people who are sort of who are running things, right? Different people booking shows, different people playing shows. It kind of cycles in and out.
So running your podcast for 13 years, do you do everything on your own, or do you have like a team, like a recruitment team?
It's just me. When I started off, there was 2 co-hosts, and that was because part of the reason I started the podcast in the first place was an opportunity to talk about music with my friends. Yeah. Because I had kids, very young kids, and it was difficult to get out and do stuff, and so they would come over, and when my kid was asleep, and then when both my kids were asleep, and we would listen to records and talk about records. There was no interviews at that point. Okay. And so it was just a way to sort of be involved in something that I was into because I didn't have a lot of time. And eventually one of them went on tour. Rob went on tour, and we thought, I guess we have 3 hosts. We need to get another host. And so we kept finding all these guest hosts while he was on tour in Europe, and they were all local musicians because that was our friend group. Yeah. And then so that sort of turned into, wait a minute, we could just interview these people instead of just talking about music we like. So it started off as just that. We'd recommend songs to each other. That was the point of the show for the first 18 or so episodes. And then it sort of became, wait a minute, these guys are coming here. They play music. I'm interested in their music. Let's talk to them. And so eventually Rob left because he was too busy with music and other things. And then a few years later, John left. And then I had a few other co-hosts that would show up now and then. But I was always doing all the work for it. Mm-hmm. They were helping by hosting, but I was doing the editing and the social media and booking the guests and all of that stuff.
Tell me about the booking and recruiting. Like, how is it just people that you like? I know you probably see a lot online, or you go to shows and stumble upon artists, but tell me about the selecting of artists.
Okay. Well, it's I think at this point, at first it was hard because I'd have to reach out to people. They didn't know what a podcast was, especially at that point, right? I mean, it wasn't a common thing. If they didn't know me, they'd be like, what the hell is this? Why do I want to go sit in the basement and talk to this guy about, So it was hard at first, other than friends. And so friends filled up. A lot of the early shows are friends. And eventually it got to the point where people knew what the show was and would reach out to me. So I get requests every day from bands, not always from here. Some people don't pay attention to the format of the show and think, I'm from Calgary, I'll ask. And it's like, no, sorry. But I get requests all the time, and usually I'm interested if it's a local artist. Often if someone I've never heard of before and I'm curious. But I am selective in that if it's someone whose music I like, they're going to jump to the top of the list of people I want to get on the show. If it's someone whose music, even if I don't like it, but there's something really interesting about it or unique or weird, they're also near the top of the list. I find a lot of people, and this is my own, it's probably not the best way to do things, but a lot of artists will send releases, or not releases, but emails where they start talking about their Spotify numbers and the amount of fans they have on social media. And those are like red flag. I don't care. I don't necessarily want the artist that has the highest Spotify numbers, because it's not that's not the point. The point isn't
Exactly.
like, and I get why they do it. I understand that's like sort of, especially for applying to festivals and things like that. You need that stuff. That's important. But for my show, it's like I don't want to know that. It's irrelevant. Like if you're doing cool music, I want to talk about that. So often I'll have a band on that's maybe played 2 shows, and I'm more interested in what they're doing because they're passionate about it and they're approaching it from an interesting way versus the person who's sitting there trying to do a more of a corporate thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And nothing against that. I get they're trying to do it as a career. I totally get it, but
Okay.
it's not sort of what the show is about,
Yeah. Wow.
if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. I was looking at the type of bands, and I was trying to dial it down. Like maybe it's genre, but there's like a lot of similar genres, but it's a lot of different ones too.
There's everything from death metal to jazz to
yeah.
country to, and that's partially just I listen to a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah.
And always have, and that's expanded since doing the show. Certain stuff. I mean, jazz in particular. I always liked jazz to a certain point, but now that I've been meeting all these local jazz artists, I'm way more interested in what that scene is about and what some of those people are doing. Where before I was just sort of casual.
I feel like though with jazz, would you consider the local jazz musicians here and artists, singers, do they make original stuff, or if they were to do standards, like
no, they do
vocalists?
So, a lot of them will do standards in their sets.
Yeah.
Some of them will even do their own versions of standards on their albums. But there's some incredibly creative stuff, like out of the box creative stuff happening here, original music, and a lot of them are. I mean, that was kind of what I thought at first too. Is like, I've seen some jazz shows.
Yeah,
it is a lot of standards. Like that's great. It's really impressive how good they are at it. But I've heard this song 40 times. But that's not the case. There's people doing some really, really like envelope pushing, really creative stuff, and that's what I want to hear too. I mean, if someone's making an album that's 30 minutes of feedback, like maybe that's not what everyone wants to listen to, but I'm curious. I want to know why. I want to know why they're doing that. I want to know what they're getting out of it. I want to know how they're determining which feedback to use and stuff like that, right? So
I like that.
It's about how interested I am in what they're doing. And there's been artists I really didn't like their music, but something about it was compelling, and so I was happy to have them on the show. And some of them have come back multiple times, and it's not that the music is bad, it's just not necessarily my genre, but I like what they do.
Yeah.
Whether it's aesthetically or even just sort of the way they approach making music, and it's interesting to me, even if it's not my thing.
What is your thoughts on R&B?
I like that's I don't want to say I like R&B because R&B is such an umbrella genre, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like when I think R&B, I listen to lots and lots and lots of soul, and I listen to a lot of Stax stuff, a lot of Motown stuff. Stax more so, the Southern soul stuff more.
Yeah.
And so I love that. Obviously, some '90s R&B came up when I was a teenager and stuff. I can get behind that too. But saying I like R&B is very, depending who you are, it could mean something totally different, right?
Yeah.
So when you say, do you like R&B, what are you referring to?
I mean, I was looking at your guests. I mean, have you interviewed any like R&B vocalists in the city at all?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
If I look through my thing, I could probably point to a few, but I'm sure I have.
Because I wanted to ask you, have you heard of Soul Supreme?
That name sounds very familiar. Is that an event that happens?
It's an event that happens, and they have artists, but it's mainly R&B.
Okay.
And the music that the DJ spin there is all R&B, and they have one of the owners there she's also a singer. She's a great singer, Keisha Booker.
Okay. Yeah.
And she also sings along Snacky sometimes. I think Snacky might have been on Witch Police Radio.
Not yet. Nope.
No, but yeah, they're great R&B singers, and I was just curious as to like maybe that wasn't your genre, or you want someone who's making their own music.
Yeah.
Aside from doing covers,
I avoid cover bands for the most part. There's been a few times where I've done not in a long time, but nothing against people who do cover bands. That's a great way to make money for a lot of musicians. I get that. I don't want to go to a cover show. I don't want to pay money to hear someone play songs that I can just listen to at home in the real version. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if I'm going to go to a band, go see music, I want it to be original music. And again, no offense to cover bands, but what am I going to talk to them about? I mean, They're not writing the songs. I'm not getting any insight into the songwriting. Maybe why they pick the songs is interesting, but for the most part, it's like, I know why they pick the songs. People know the songs. They're going to dance to the songs. They're going to buy beer while they're dancing to the songs.
Yeah.
That's what it's for. That's the point of it, right? So it's not really... I'd rather have someone who's doing something original and creative because there's more sort of obvious questions to ask about that, about
Mhm.
how and why and who and all that.
Yeah. No, have you heard of the event Bahai Kubo?
I have not.
So this event only lasted, I think, a year. Last year, it was actually held at the restaurant connected to the Royal Albert Arms.
Okay.
And
In the front there, the
yeah,
atrium,
in the
right?
front
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the windows and stuff. They hosted. It was kind of like Soul Supreme, but they also served food there,
Oh, cool.
which is great. And I played for a couple artists there, but it also made me think, like, it is only just covers, but occasionally you would have that one artist who is going to sing
Yeah.
like one original song. But would you ever find yourself going to any events like that at all, like having just a one opener or like one artist? Because normally they would be small artists.
Which is always good to
Yeah.
see. Are you asking because of the in the cover song context, or?
Yeah, well, it is mainly verse into the Filipino community as
Okay.
well.
Cool.
But the owner is actually opening it again, but at Saint Cafe.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, like, would Witch Police ever, find his way there at all, or?
Maybe. I mean, I'm not gonna say no to anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting you mentioned, because the Filipino community. There's so many cultural communities in Winnipeg that have their own stuff going on as far as
Yeah.
music goes, right? And that's obviously stuff like, I mean, like country, like punk rock, like metal, like all that stuff is very, very well represented in Winnipeg. I mean, it has
Yes.
been for decades and decades.
Indie,
Winnipeg's had a
folk.
lot of those genres have always been popular, right?
Yeah.
But there's people from other countries who moved here and are bringing those kind of sounds from where they came from or where their parents came from, whatever, and it kind of melds with this whatever the Winnipeg sound is.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious about that stuff, because it's outside my experience as a white Canadian, like who grew
Yeah.
up in this music scene, going to punk shows and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone I've had people on from different African countries, and they bring their influences, which some of the stuff I've never even heard before, like the styles, right?
Yeah.
And it's super cool to hear that filtered through, whether it's hip hop, whether it's R&B, whether it's indie rock, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about what the different cultural communities are bringing to the table, because it changes things. It adds new sounds into something that's not stale, but has been sort of the same for a long time.
Okay. Which brings us to our first segment.
Okay.
So I was listening to your podcast and on Spotify, and you kind of do like little cuts in between, and you play their music
Yes.
and their songs between questions. I thought we can do a little spin on that.
Okay.
And maybe I can play one of my demos for you,
Sure.
and I
Yeah,
can
love
get
to
your
hear it.
live reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is unreleased. It's called Oh No No.
Is this just a solo thing?
It's a solo thing.
Cool.
Produced by me.
Are you playing everything?
Everything.
I don't know if you want me to talk during it, or should I wait till it's
Anything you want.
This isn't what I expected, because you were talking about R&B so much. Not that I didn't know what kind of music to be doing, but this is it's not what I expected. How do you? This is a question I ask a lot of people on the show.
Yeah.
How do you define the kind of music that you play? I mean, I have ideas from listening to this might be influenced by, but what do you call it? Where does it come from?
I do love the Beatles. It does kind of give that Beatles vibe, but how would you define? I think maybe like pop rock,
Okay, yeah.
pop, indie rock, indie pop rock.
The pop thing is definitely there.
Yeah.
And the kind of jangly guitar
Yeah.
sound is very indie rock, yeah, for sure. For sure. But again, this is kind of one of the interesting things, is that you can't meet someone and assume you know what they're going to play.
Yeah,
Because this music, even if you're skipping the Beatles part and going kind of 80s sort of jangle pop stuff,
Yeah.
that's still way ahead of your time, right? Like in terms
Yeah.
of age-wise. So how did you? Why is this coming out of you? It's catchy for sure. Like,
Yeah. I don't know. When I was making this, is this turning into my own Witch Police
fine, I'm
interview?
I'm curious. This is where I take over, right?
This was all recorded in my room.
Okay.
And my parents were out for the cabin. And I was talking to this girl. And she loved the band, the Arctic Monkeys.
Okay, yeah.
And I've never heard of the Arctic Monkeys aside from their usual hits. But that was Oh No No.
Cool, yeah, that's great.
And to continue your question, yeah, I was writing this song, and this girl I was talking to, we never even dated, and she loved the Arctic Monkeys, and I was like, okay, you know what? I told her I make music, and I'm gonna make an Arctic Monkeys song. And I'd listened to maybe like 2-3 songs of them. First time ever like fully listening, actually listening, aside from it having it on the background or in movies. And I was like, oh, so this is where I'm gonna get that distorted vocal sound. And then I collect records. I collect a lot of Beatles records, and I wanted to add a guitar solo because nowadays you hardly hear guitar solos,
It's
especially in pop songs.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like,
there's a lot of reasons behind that, I think. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, when I made that, and then I sent it to her, and the funny thing is, she was in Vancouver at the time. I sent that song to her, and she said, yeah, this isn't going to work out.
Because of the song?
Not because of the song. It was like the timing was just like,
Sure, yeah.
She loved the song. Like, don't get me, she's like, oh my gosh, this is great. 2 days later, like, no response. And then she's like, yeah, this isn't going to work out. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
Well, I mean, that's a good shot, though, like, making the song.
Yeah.
Yeah. This reminds me, you probably haven't heard of them, but there's a band called the Saltines. They were from, I want to say BC, but that could be wrong. And I saw them play a show at the Broadway Neighborhood Center. We used to have punk shows in the basement there.
Yeah.
And this sounds a lot like them. This reminds me of the Saltines.
Okay.
They had a trumpet player, and I could hear where horns would work at various parts in the song. You have to look them up.
Yeah, no,
but
the Saltines.
the Saltines,
like
yeah.
the crackers.
No, but spelled like teens, like teenagers.
Oh, okay.
Saltines,
okay.
yeah. And
Yeah,
they had
I
this
did not mean to make a racist joke there.
No.
but that's-
I wouldn't even thought of that. Yeah, bro. Yeah, exactly. No. Yeah. There's actually a specific song that reminds me of. I'll tell you later. But yeah, it's and they played at punk shows with punk bands, but they were all very, very pop and the trumpet and keyboard and stuff. But that kind of bouncy '60s jangly pop vibe that's the first thing it reminded me. I was actually almost like waiting to hear a trumpet because it reminds me of the Saltines. But yeah, no, it was cool. It was cool.
Wow.
So okay, I have a question for you then about this. Not to derail your podcast here, but is this something you do live, or is something you intend to do live?
See, I would love to do it live. I was in numerous bands, and I would always pitch, guys, like, let's do a song. But as time went on, like, I got kicked out of this band because the lead singer felt like I was getting most of the attention, which I feel like, it's weird because I'm not even the front man, right?
Yeah.
Got kicked out of that band. Got into another band. Got kicked out of that one. And it's not really, I want to say it's not me, but like obviously there's a common denominator there. It's like I'm in the band and now I'm out. But I just always found myself that every band that I'm in, they never really want to listen to my ideas. So I've never really got to experiment into playing my own songs live.
Okay.
And so I'm in this band right now, and now we're making our own original music. Eventually I want to pitch the idea of like, hey, maybe I can do a song, but right now we're kind of just focusing on lead singer.
Okay.
But yeah.
But you obviously have songs in your back pocket, right?
Oh, tons.
Cool.
Tons.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, it's I think there's a lot of people maybe who don't even play any other bands who are doing what you're doing because the ease of recording on your own it's so much easier now than it used to be. You can do it on your phone, right? Like, I mean, so I think there's a lot of people making really cool music that just haven't either had the opportunity or know how or too nervous or whatever to actually put it out there. But it's I think that with every year that passes, we can get more and more people doing bedroom records that whether you hear them or not, they exist somewhere, right? And hopefully one day they all make it out there.
Yeah. Can I play you another?
Please do. Yeah.
This one is actually one of the first songs I've ever made.
Okay.
On this iPad right
Cool,
here.
cool. Is it possible to pause this for a second?
Oh, yep, of course.
If
Yeah.
you don't, is there a washroom here?
We're gonna take a little break.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to ask you, but I figured we could put a song on. It may be a good time to.
All right, so this song was my first ever song
Okay.
that I made. I was 18 years old, and completely out of my iPad and an iRig.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you
And
can plug
it's-
things directly into the
And it's called Demo Track 1.
Very creative.
Yeah,
name, yeah.
yeah. It's more of a slower song.
Yeah. What is that guitar effect?
It's a nylon string, but the one is a synthesizer.
Okay, yeah. I can hear the nylon string.
And if I see you, I would not believe you, so please take me down. Take me where I'm supposed to be right now.
It's very different than the other song, but it still has some of that 60s
Yeah,
thing to it.
you
Right?
can
The
still
pop-
kinda
the pop
hear
thing is there, I'm sure, yeah.
Take me down.
I like the crunchy
Take
the background. That's cool.
where I'm supposed to be right now. 'Cause if there was a way for me to make you fall in love, then I would be done.
So what has anything happened with this song? Have you released it anywhere?
None of these are released.
Okay.
But I do plan on releasing them at one point, maybe get them mixed and mastered by some people. But yeah, I've just never really had the confidence to
I mean,
release
you should.
it.
They're good songs. Like
Thank you.
You should definitely do it. Yeah.
I just one thing that I do mention a lot to people I show these songs to is that with the music scene already in Winnipeg, which is I feel like this is a perfect thing to bring up to you
Sure,
because you
yeah.
know a lot about the music scene. I just feel like having like me or like a guy like me releasing songs like this is just so like out of line.
In what way?
In a way, I just feel like if you see like it's not like punk and it's not rock and it's not folk,
Sure. Yeah.
but I feel like that's what's really like selling here in Winnipeg, you know what I mean?
Yes, but okay, I know what you're saying, but I would counter that by saying like you should release whatever it is you do, and I think that like who cares what the popular genres are? I think that's where a lot of people go wrong is they focus too much on changing what their natural sound is. This is obviously something that you've come up with based on the influences you have and based on your experience as a musician and based on all that, and so I would encourage you to put it out as is. Just be like, this is your stuff. This is what you sound like. This is what comes out of your brain. Put it out there and be proud of it, because a lot of people will sort of switch what they're doing to suit what they think the trend is.
Yeah.
And I think that I hate the term selling out. We used to use that a lot. Like I was actually recently reading this book about the 90s punk scene, not in Winnipeg, but just, internationally.
general,
It blew up, and I was in junior high when, Green Day's Dookie came out and stuff, and that was massive, and the Offspring Smash and all these records. I recently read a book about it, and it was talking about sort of the concept of selling out, which at that point was like a swear word, right? I mean, you didn't want to be told that you were a sellout because, especially with punk rock, you're supposed to have this integrity with what you do, and I think that selling out is not making money off your music. That's not selling out. Being successful is not selling out. Fundamentally changing your sound is selling out. So I think if you have something that you do and you do well and you put everything into it, you shouldn't change it because of trends.
Yeah.
So I mean, if this is what your music that you create is, and this is the sound that you have that just comes out of you naturally based on what you've listened to and what you've experienced, you shouldn't change it. You shouldn't touch it at all. Put it out as it is. And if people don't like it, who cares?
Yeah.
Because you're going to find someone who does like it. And that's the person who's going to come to your show.
Yeah.
And I think that with podcasting and with music, people are too concerned, like what I said about the Spotify numbers earlier, right?
Yeah.
People are way too concerned with quantity of listeners versus quality of listeners. And I know there's podcasts that have way more listeners than I do. But I'd rather have one person who engages with my content, tells me what they like about it, shares that band's music after they've appeared on the show. That's more valuable than 50 people who I don't know anything about. There's just 50 numbers versus one person who's engaged. That one person who's the show's for. Yeah. And I feel the same way about music. I mean, none of the bands I was in were very successful, but there's still people who like some of the songs that tell me about it today. Yeah. And it's been, 10 years, whatever, 15 years. And that's the person who it's for. It's not for, none of my bands were really playing music that was for wide consumption anyway, but I'd much rather have the one person who it meant something to than 100 people who are just faceless, nameless numbers. Mm-hmm. And so, I would encourage you to put it out. If this is what your music is, this is what you feel like is sort of your natural expression, who cares what people think? You should do it. Yeah. That's what I say anyway.
And before we move on.
Yeah. Sorry to...
Yeah. No. I did have a question, which you already answered, but I feel like you should answer it again. Tell me about this.
So, this is it's funny because this is AI that made this, and I have very strong opinions about AI. I don't like it. I think it's a detriment to society in general. Yeah. But for years I've had a theme song for the show, and there's been different ones made by different people. Initially, it was that song "We Are the Witch Police." We used a clip from that because it made sense. Over the years, I've had various people from various bands record intros for me. They've just sent me, "Hey, you want to use this for an intro?" And it's always really cool. It's something interesting, and it's from a guest. But I had been using the same one for a while. Yeah. And a friend of mine who actually played in bands with me when we were younger, he had been experimenting with AI stuff. Yeah. And he said he found this thing where you could make your own AI music. You kind of tell it what you want. You give it the lyrics. And so he gave me sort of a big pile of different jingles. Mm-hmm. And they were all very similar. It was different. There's a folk one. There's an opera one. There's a hip hop one. Yeah. And then there's this reggae one. And I mean, outside of local music, which makes up a huge amount of my listening, the type of music I listen to most is sort of 80s hardcore and reggae. And I have a very large collection of Jamaican music. Wow. From 60s to late 90s, I guess. Yeah. And lots of 45s, lots of singles. And I kind of nerd out about it a lot. Yeah. So this was one that obviously spoke to me because it was I like all of the other genres, but I have a reggae jingle now for my show. So I've been using it for the past year or so. I'm sure it'll change eventually to something else, but it's sort of the only time I've been cool with AI has been that this is because I can't do that. I don't have the musical ability to record my own jingles like that and stuff. So it was kind of a cool little extra bonus thing. And but yeah, so that one speaks to me because it's a style of music I'm really into. But yeah, I listen to lots of stuff, but local music is a huge chunk. And then if you were to sort of stack them in piles, which I guess I could do because it's all physical, reggae would be here, punk and hardcore here. And then there's folk, there's jazz, there's metal, there's all kinds of stuff. But reggae and punk are the main things. And my favorite band of all time is Bad Brains, and the Bad Brains are a punk band that also plays reggae, right? So it makes sense that that's kind of my wheelhouse.
The Bad Brains.
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, this goes to a question you asked before. One of the former singers of the Bad Brains, they're still around not now, but they've been around for decades, and they've had various lineup changes. And the singer on one of their records, they had one major label album, and they had a new singer for that album. He's been on my show. Oh. And I reached out to him online because I was seeing him on social media, and he was in a band after Bad Brains many years later called Fireburn, who were also amazing, one of my favorite punk bands of the past 20 years maybe. Yeah. They're not around anymore either. They put out an LP and an EP and a single, and that was it. Because one of their members died and they stopped. But I'd been listening to his stuff for years, and I reached out to him, and he was happy to come on the show. I got a copy of his solo album. He autographed, he personalized it to me and stuff. And it was this is a guy whose music, in one form or another, I've been listening to for decades. Yeah. And it was a great interview. I think I'm going to reach out to do a part 2. We talked about it since. And that's the kind of sort of non-Winnipeg artist I would have on.
Yeah.
Right? Someone whose music I know intimately, who I've been a fan of for a long time, who I have a lot of questions for. That's cool. I mean, this doesn't tie into the local part of it, but every once in a while, if I have an opportunity to talk to someone like that, that sort of comes out. I know that was a very weird tangent from there, but
no.
But the Bad Brains, greatest band ever, in my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah, the Bad Brains. So you mentioned that you were in a couple bands.
Yes.
And
most of them not very good.
But in those bands, you played the guitar.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, I played other things in some of them, but mostly guitar. Yeah.
Would you want to play something for us right now?
Not really, but I mean, I guess if it's part of the show, I'll have to. I haven't played guitar at all in years.
Come on.
And I was very bad at it at the time. So maybe if you give me a guitar, I'll just sort of randomly noodle around on while we talk about other stuff.
Yeah, let's see what you can play.
It's not gonna be good. Literally years.
Sam Thompson in the frame.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. playing badly on the guitar. No, it's funny that you have this on your show, because I think that you can have a lot of people on the show who this is really a thing for, right?
Yeah.
Where they can actually actively. Part of the reason I do the podcast is because I'm bad at music. I mean, I can talk about it, I can listen to it, I can review it, but playing it's been a really long time. So yeah, this is not going to be very helpful for your show, but yeah, I do have a guitar at home. Maybe I have one acoustic guitar that's in the basement, that's broken, and I have a bass hanging on my wall that I mess around with sometimes. But that's about it.
Okay, yeah, nice.
But yeah, no, honestly, this is not something that
What's something that you always found yourself playing?
Well,
playing the guitar.
This is a good question, because I am very, very bad at playing other people's music. The reason that I wrote a lot of songs in my bands is because I can't play other stuff. I'm not good enough. So it would be like I'd come up with a song, not even know what the chords are called.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, I'd be able to make up these chords, and then I'd have other band members who were good at music
Yeah.
who would then be able to turn it into something. So realistically, I can never be in a cover band because I can't play anything.
Yeah.
I can't play anyone. You know, I can play power chords for some punk songs, but not off the top of my head. I don't know how any of them go. And I would just make up stuff that was kind of then fixed by other people, I guess, if you want to say that. So
Why don't you play something that you made before?
that requires me remembering how to play it. And I honestly don't know if I can even... I mean, it's been a long time since I was...
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
Maybe, yeah. Does it? Is that how it goes? No, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. I mean, I'm trying to think of like Mouthboat songs, but it was like I feel bad now because I'm sitting here talking about.
Hey, no worries.
No, but I honestly, like, it's been a really long time, and I'm sure if I sat down and remembered how the songs went, I would do it. But I feel like my guitar playing was more of like a rhythm instrument than anything else.
Okay.
Because it was not necessarily melodic at all.
Well, why don't you play just like something rhythmic and just keep it going over? Let's have a little jam set.
All right. This was okay, yeah. So on the Mouthboat, which was the most recent band I was in, it was mostly like I can't talk and play either. It's another thing. It was mostly a kind of noisy punk noise rock thing, but we had occasionally little interludes, and that what I was just playing was one of them, and we had a bunch of samples and weird keyboard sounds and stuff on top of it. But it was just. There's a different pattern to it, but I don't remember what it was. But it was just that over and over again. And then I would play sort of weird keyboard stuff on top of it. And that's another instrument I'm bad at. But so very much rhythm rather than anything lead.
Okay, let's get it going. Yep.
Which is... already much better than you know what though, I think that
give it up for Sam Thompson, guys.
Bry's definitely right. I think that
great.
It's interesting, you know, having been in bands, and I know a lot of people who are incredibly good at music. It just this ties into the cover band thing actually.
Yeah.
Who are just incredible musicians. They can hear something and play it instantly and flawlessly. And I've never been able to. I mean, you know, but some of them can't write their own songs, and I feel like it's always impressive when someone can do both.
So it's like a curse and a blessing.
Yeah, because some people they're so technically good at it.
Yeah.
But they've spent their entire lives playing music, learning other people's stuff. And so for me, I can't play anyone's stuff, but I can write a song that hopefully can be fixed by other people. But you know what I mean? Like, I mean, so it's kind of funny that like I don't have the talent definitely at all to I couldn't go into a room where jam's happening and join in because I don't know. Yeah, I just don't have that. But I could come up with 4 or 5 chords that maybe I'm not sure what the names of them are.
Yeah.
Put something together, come up with some stupid lyrics, and there's a song.
And it's funny you bring that up because I grew up playing classical guitar.
Right.
And I actually studied at the conservatory.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Music.
Yeah.
And by the time I turned 17, I was already competing above senior level.
Mm-hmm.
And then my professor was telling me, it's like, all right, now that you're turning 18, you either go to U of M, study for performing, or into composing. But I never really liked that idea of playing someone else's music. And like, because I feel like anybody can play like Bach.
Well, I mean, with enough practice, right?
Or like,
I certainly couldn't do that.
well, like,
I know what you mean.
In a classical sense.
Sure.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you'll have like 6 other talented guitarists just playing the same.
Right.
And it just got so like, I just found it kind of boring.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's another reason why I stopped playing classical guitar is because I really didn't feel like I could express myself if I were to continue on into
right,
that.
Because you're doing music that's been done
part of music
thousands of times for over hundreds of years.
Exactly.
And there's no variation in it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I felt like being able to learn that way, learn everything classically.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is like I don't really like that term either, because like people always think that classically automatically makes you like, oh, this guy's like really good. He's classically trained.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
There's a stigma to that for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just felt like whether or not you're talented or not, like a great example is like you don't know much about the fundamentals of guitar or the chords, but you were still able to make music.
Yes.
And make your own music, which I'm sure sounded great. Like that pattern alone was a really catchy pattern. And it just felt like there was more for me to do outside of classical music.
For sure.
And for other people out there listening, it's like, if you think that all you're gonna do is study and play other people's music, then go ahead. But if you think that you can do more, then just try out, experiment, join other bands, get kicked out of them.
For sure.
And just like find your sound.
Well, I think that part of the reason I've always been drawn to punk rock, not necessarily punk as a genre, but that whole DIY aesthetic has been because, I mean, you have 3 chords and the truth. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And that's definitely associated with punk rock, that saying. But, right, I mean, like, you don't need to, it's a genre where you don't need to be good at playing music, but you can, but there's so much emotion in it.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the most emotional shows I've been to have not been, I've been to classical shows, I've been to the opera, I've been to all this stuff. It's not necessarily that. It's not necessarily someone doing love songs, country music. It's someone screaming and maybe not even screaming on key and thrashing around on the stage. But they mean it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's to like, this is maybe not what everyone, people won't agree on this, but I think that the concept of having soul in music is not genre related. It's not R&B. I mean, R&B is definitely soulful music, but I think that the best music has soul, and I think that soul, to me anyway, means that whatever the emotion is coming out. And if that's coming out and you're singing off key, but there's that power behind it that makes it feel like what you're saying is believable, that's soul music to me. And so it was you can have a punk band that knows how to play 4 chords combined between all 4 members, and if whatever they're delivering has that intensity behind it, whatever the emotion is, that is good music to me. Like, and it doesn't need to be technically complicated. I listen to some stuff that's incredibly technically complicated. Like, I mean, a lot of the jazz I listen to, it's way out there in terms of like, I could never ever in 45 years, if I practiced every day, play as good as some of these people. But it's not even necessarily the notes they're playing. It's the the feeling behind it. And that's kind of how I feel about music in general, is that it doesn't matter if it's simple, it doesn't matter if it's complicated, the feeling is what's most important. And that's what I get as a listener. If I believe you, whatever you're saying, if you're angry, if you're sad, if you're in love, whatever it is, then I like it. And I think that's, you asked earlier about what genres and stuff I do on the show. And I think it's, first of all, someone doing something interesting, but if you're doing music that I believe and I take you seriously with what you're saying in the songs, whatever the song is about, I think that's something I want to find out more about.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does.
And that's, I think, why I like lots of different types of music, because I can hear that soul in a death metal band. I can hear it in classical music. I can hear it in jazz. I can hear it in country. I can hear it in whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, like, it's the 3 chords and the truth thing is definitely a punk rock thing, but there's so many other genres that can apply to. Even more complicated stuff. Even jazz, you can have 3 chords happening, and then someone's going way into outer space on top of it. But there's still that sort of it's there, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, 3 chords and the truth.
Right. And the truth doesn't need to be, I mean, I think that saying, I wish I knew who originally said it, but it's always associated with punk rock. And I think it's more so like having a message in your lyrics, having a song about something important, about an important social issue, a political issue. But that's not always the case. You can have a love song that is 3 chords and the truth, because the person singing the song, you feel what they're feeling in the song.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, as a very heavy music consumer, in that I listen to music constantly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. I know that I'm way off from your original question, but that's what I'm looking for as a fan of music, is something with soul, something with feeling, something that I take seriously. And just to one more thing about this before, because I don't want to derail your show here, but one of the questions I ask a lot of artists is, Winnipeg and Manitoba in general, especially Winnipeg, seems to me to have, the audience here has a very strong bullshit detector. And I think that the best bands are the ones that are genuine in what they're doing. And I think people, you take a genre like hip hop, right? I mean, I know a lot of local rappers. I've known many of them for many years. I started going to local rap shows late 90s, early 2000s, and there'd be people rapping like they're from Winnipeg. They have the Winnipeg accent. They're talking about issues that affect people in Winnipeg. They're not trying to sound like anything but someone from Winnipeg. That I like. And then the same show, you'd have someone trying to sound like they're from New York or from LA or from Atlanta. And they have this kind of, they're imitating what they've heard on a record, but it's not them. And like one of my favorite rappers in Canada is, he's been on my show a few times. He's not from here, but he's got a lot of connections here, is Epic. And he sounds like a aging 50-something guy from the prairies. I mean, he has the least hip-hop voice ever, but it's incredibly compelling. And I think a lot of people who listen to rap exclusively would hear that and be like, what is this? Like, what this guy doesn't sound like. But it's genuine and it's real, and what he's saying is no, even though he has this very stereotypical hick prairie, like really strong hoser accent, right? Like, and he's got gray hair and stuff, and he's not what you expect from hip hop. But I really like his stuff because it's like I feel a genuineness coming from it. Yeah, if that makes sense.
No, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's passion and genuinity, like what you're looking for in an artist, and that you'd want on your show.
Yeah, just being real about whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like if you passion is a good word for it. If you're passionate about it, it comes through in the music, and then I want to talk to you because you're clearly passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
If you're just doing something to kind of call back something we talked about earlier, if you're just doing something because it's the latest trend, you're probably not going to be passionate about it. Like, and with your music, for example, right? If you tried to change that to be whatever the new thing is, it might not have the same impact because you're not doing you anymore. You're doing you filtered through something that you think is going to be popular. And I think that doing that maybe works for a while for some people, but in the end, it's not your art anymore. It's you're selling it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. So with podcasting, with music, and obviously with me starting this show, and doing music also, what is something that you could give to me, like as advice for someone starting off with 2 things that you're really familiar with?
Sure. I think that one of the, I wish I knew the actual number, but there's definitely there's a threshold for episodes that I don't know what it is offhand, but there's people done studies on this and stuff. Let's just say it's 12 episodes. I don't know what the actual number is. Like 90% of podcasts don't make it past that point. It's a very, very low number of episodes. so many people get really passionate about it. They have a great idea. They go out and buy all this equipment, and then they start doing it, and they're like, wait, this is not, either it's not for me, or I don't like being on my voice on how it sounds, or I don't like doing all this editing and social media stuff and all these other parts of it. And so most podcasts stop. And I know people who've done great shows and they've done 20 episodes and then it's over. And it's like, no, you got to keep doing. So my advice is to just keep doing it, whether anyone's listening or watching or not, because they're not going to be watching at first. And they're not going to be listening at first. And it's going to take a long time to get established. Like, I mean, there are many, many shows, I'm sure even in Winnipeg, that get way more listeners than I do because my subject matter is so niche. But for the people who like that subject matter, it's what they want to hear. And so you need to just keep doing it. If you've figured out what you want your show to be about and what you want to focus on and who you want to talk to, just do it. Don't let any numbers don't even look at the numbers. I mean, like, if you don't, it doesn't matter how many people are watching it. Someone could find it 10 years from now and watch it. And it could still be relevant to them. So I think that people worry way too much about being successful. And people see podcasts hosted by celebrities and they see how many listens and views and all this stuff they get, and they think, oh, I can do that too. And then they try it, and this happens a lot with like comedy type podcasts, right? They see professional comedians getting tons of listeners and getting really popular, and they try it, and it doesn't mean they're not funny. It just means that no one has any clue who they are, and there's 700,000 comedy podcasts. Yeah. And it's like, how do you expect anyone to hear you? You've done 2 episodes, and they could be fantastic episodes, but how do you get your thing heard above everyone else? And I think that the answer to that is to have a very specific focus, know what you want to talk about, know what your show is about, and the people who care about that subject matter will find it. It might take a while, it might take a lot of work. You might go through a long period of feeling like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? But it doesn't matter. Like, if you are passionate about this, and like, having watched some of your stuff, you're putting in the work for this, right? Like, it's not just you're not just sitting there on a phone having a conversation, and then that could be a podcast too. But you've got the video elements. There's a lot going on here, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, you're obviously putting in the time. So I would just say, don't get discouraged, because it's gonna probably suck for a while. Yeah. And that's part of it. Yeah. And if you really like what you're doing, you think it's important, and you think that the stories you're getting out of your guests are important, which I do on my show, then just keep plugging away. Wow. And I mean, we have a local podcast community. We used to do festivals before the pandemic. And I think everyone in that group, I mean, first of all, I want to plug it. I encourage people to come once a month. We post them on we have social media for the Manitoba Podcast Festival. It's not a festival anymore. Maybe it will be one day again, but go there. Every month we have a meetup, and it's podcasters of all different styles, ages. I mean,
Do you know the name of this?
Well, it's called Manitoba Podcast Festival. Okay. The social media. So we just posted there. We used to have that for when we. Yeah. But anyway, So people should come to that. It's all different people, different ages, different backgrounds, doing podcasts, and they're passionate about, and we encourage each other.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Everybody, this has been In the Frame with Sam Thompson.
That's cool. Awesome. Thanks for the guitar thing, right? But
no, that was awesome.
That was fun, yeah. No, you definitely should come and get involved, because it's basically, we just encourage each other and give each other advice and tips and equipment stuff and all that. So